Alright, well here is our next video featuring Elizabeth Warren, the Democratic challenger against incumbent President Donald Trump. Of course, this is our next hypothetical scenario for 2020. As we did in the last video, we'll just go through all 50 states plus DC and quickly determine who we think is going to take the electoral votes necessary. Again, you need 270 to win out of the 538 total, so let's get to it. As we always do, we're going to go from west to east. Up in Washington, very liberal state. Elizabeth Warren, not very well known in this part of the country, but there's just been no indication that the Democrats have had really anything to worry about in Washington state. So 12 electoral votes right off the bat to Elizabeth Warren. Another 7 in Oregon. Again, Republicans, as we outlined in the video featuring Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump. We talked about how Oregon, particularly in this part of the state over here in the eastern portion of the state, have managed to make up some ground in recent years. Kate Brown, though, the incumbent Democratic governor, winning re-election there pretty comfortably, so that should be a pretty comfortable win for Elizabeth Warren. California, the same thing. Right in here, Fresno area, and to the east of it, this, of course, right in there is where Kevin McCarthy, the minority leader in the House, that's where his district is, but right now, California, with all the major urban areas, just too liberal a state for Donald Trump to have much of a chance out here. So already, just on the West Coast alone, Elizabeth Warren taking 74 electoral votes. She needs 270 to win. Now in Idaho, down here in the Boise area, Democrats have made some gains in what is an overwhelmingly Republican state. The Democratic candidate in the race to unseat Brad Little, the governor, did manage to get the vote total up to about just under 40%. And of course, they managed to take the Boise area narrowly, but still, given the fact that Boise has grown a lot in recent years, it does make it a little bit more swingy than Republicans would ideally like, given that going forward in the future, Idaho could potentially be in play. But that's just not realistic yet for the Democrats, so Idaho should comfortably go for Donald Trump. Nevada has seen a big shift to the left. This shouldn't be too concerning for Elizabeth Warren, particularly considering both senators now there in Nevada are women. So that should, both senators in Nevada, California, and Washington are all women, which bodes very well for Elizabeth Warren in this race. Arizona, Democrats have managed to make up some ground there as well. Of course, they have themselves a senator now, that being Kirsten Sinema, but Arizona in the presidential elections is still pretty conservative. That shouldn't be too much of a problem. Democrats, if there's polling data that suggests that they have a real chance at Arizona, then maybe we'll make this a little bit swingier. But for now, John McCain's old state, this should still be relatively easy. For Donald Trump, Utah, there's nothing much to discuss there. Mitt Romney's state, he was just elected to the Senate there. So Donald Trump in this model responds to those quick 4 wins for Elizabeth Warren with 3 of his own, and he has himself 21 votes in his column. Montana, Democrats should not just overlook this one quite yet. I mean, if you're able to get a governor and a senator elected there, then there's no denying that Montana is a state that Democrats could potentially target. But in presidential elections, Montana is still very, very red. Hillary Clinton only carrying 35% of the vote. I would expect Elizabeth Warren and really any other candidate to go well over 40% in a general election against Donald Trump. But Montana, just not populated enough, really. There's not a big urban area, much as there is in Idaho with the Boise area down in the southwest portion of the state. So Montana should still be pretty easy for Donald Trump. Wyoming might be the most Republican state in the entire country. Colorado, Democrats have seen Colorado take a pretty good shift to the left. Cory Gardner, the Republican senator there, is facing a very, very tough re-election in 2020. He's probably the most vulnerable Republican of the senators left because Colorado, similarly to Nevada, has seen a dramatic shift to the left. I'm going to give this one to Elizabeth Warren. It did go for Hillary Clinton pretty comfortably, so this should be for the Democrats. New Mexico is one of the most reliable states in this part of the country for the Democrats. Tom Udall and Martin Heinrich, very popular there. So New Mexico shouldn't be a problem. Hillary Clinton also winning there pretty comfortably. And then this whole area of the state, as we talked about in the last video, Democrats picked up a House seat right in here, and that basically the entire southern half of the state. So that should be theirs for the taking. Now into the Plain States, North Dakota. Again, Kent Conrad, Heidi Heitkamp, they've been able to get themselves elected here in North Dakota, but in presidential elections is kind of similar to Montana in that even though in some statewide elections this may go blue for maybe one senator or maybe the governorship, North Dakota is still pretty comfortably Republican for the general election. South Dakota, same thing. Even though there have been some tight margins, particularly in the gubernatorial race in the 2018 midterms, South Dakota should be fine for Donald Trump. Nebraska, Ben Sass is not very popular there. The polling data that we get for him in his 2020 reelection bid is going to be telling because he's not very popular, and perhaps this could be a scenario where Nebraska does give one electoral vote to Elizabeth Warren. Now, I did give this one vote to Kamala Harris in the last video that we did. I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case at this time because as we've seen a lot of polling data in the Nebraska area amongst Nebraska Democrats in the Omaha and Lincoln area, they want to see a more diverse candidate, particularly one who's African American. Of course, Elizabeth Warren is not that. So I think Donald Trump is going to take all 5 votes from Nebraska. Now, Kansas, Laura Kelly, of course, upset Chris Kobach in the 2018 midterms, winning the governorship there. That was very unexpected, but Jerry Moore and Pat Roberts, still the 2 senators there, still went very easily for Donald Trump. It is, Kansas is a state that I think is shifting a little bit, but it's just shifting way too slowly for Democrats to identify this as a target, so that should be another 6 for Donald Trump. Oklahoma, same kind of thing to Kansas. Not much to really talk about there. Democrats did get themselves a House seat right in the center of the state there in the Oklahoma City area, but for them, it's kind of baby steps in Oklahoma before they think they have a real chance at it in the general. Texas, however, in this entire sort of middle portion of the country here, this is the state where they actually have the best opportunity. There are so many big cities in Texas. You've got Dallas, Austin, Houston, San Antonio, El Paso, which, of course, the more cities there are, the more populated the state is, the better it is for the Democrats. And Texas is, of course, one of the most populated states in the United States. And so, all in all, Texas should be in play for them. Of course, this is not a state where they have themselves a representative, like potentially Beto O'Rourke, who might be able to run from Texas. So, in the general, Hillary Clinton did not do very well. Beto O'Rourke did extremely well in Texas, but for now, 38 votes to Donald Trump from Texas. Now, Minnesota. Democrats were a little concerned about Minnesota after 2016. It did go for Hillary Clinton, but narrowly. However, they crushed it in Minnesota in the midterms. Amy Klobuchar and Tina Smith both comfortably won re-election, and they also got Tim Walz, the governor, elected. Minnesota should not be a concern for the Democrats, so they finally end this losing streak of, 6 in a row, and they get themselves Minnesota. Iowa. Now, Steve King has alienated some Republican voters. This is his district in the northwestern portion of the state. Again, there are only 4 districts in the state of Iowa. Democrats have 3 of them. Of course, Chuck Grassley and Joni Ernst, the 2 senators there. Joni Ernst faces a potentially tough re-election in 2020. Kim Reynolds did defeat Fred Hubble in a very close gubernatorial race. So for now, though, again, unless polling data suggests otherwise, Iowa was one of the first states that kind of got Trump going in 2016. I'm going to give Iowa and its 6 votes to Donald Trump. Missouri, similar scenario. Democrats, of course, lost a Senate seat here. They had Claire McCaskill. Kansas City, or at least half of Kansas City, is right there in Missouri on the western portion, and then an extremely liberal area right there in that pocket of St. Louis, but it's just not enough given everything else in the middle of the state here. Missouri might be a little close given the fact that Donald Trump is so unpopular right now, even amongst independents, but Missouri should not be too concerning right now for Republicans, and so Donald Trump with that has himself a 1-vote lead, 105, 104. Arkansas, nothing to discuss there. Louisiana, and it's 8 electoral votes. Now, Democrats have themselves the governorship here, which is still pretty bizarre considering how conservative the state of Louisiana has become. Bill Cassidy does face re-election in 2020. Again, it was recently that Democrats had Mary Landrieu, the senator from Louisiana. But Baton Rouge and New Orleans, of course, the 2 liberal strongholds, and then to a little bit lesser extent up here in the northwestern portion of the state is Shreveport. But in a general, this should not be too troubling for Donald Trump. Mississippi, again, very large African-American population, but that is basically the only the only reason that the Democrats have any chance in that state. Of course, Jackson, Mississippi is a big urban area that can get a Democrat elected to the House potentially, but just not in a general election. Alabama, same thing. Doug Jones, of course, pulled off a historic win in the Senate, defeating Roy Moore, but that's by no means a harbinger of things to come. Doug Jones is probably going to lose re-election in 2020, so that's another 9 for Donald Trump. Tennessee, and it's 11 votes. We've seen a very big shift in recent years to the right from Tennessee. Phil Bredesen, one of the most popular, well-known Democrats, maybe the most popular Democrat in the entire state other than Al Gore of the last 20 years, was thoroughly defeated by now freshman Senator Marsha Blackburn. So Tennessee is going to be easily in the Republican column. Kentucky has been a little bit of a target recently for Democrats. Mitch McConnell has an extremely low approval rating, but still in general elections, Lexington and Louisville are really the only reasons that Democrats have any kind of hope in Kentucky. So I'm still going to give Kentucky to the Republicans. Now, in this area of the entire country, Illinois is the most thoroughly Democratic. You've got a very, very big Democratic stronghold up here in Chicago. Peoria, Springfield are also pretty blue. Republicans, they got Mark Kirk elected there. They did have a governor there up until this past election when J.B. Pritzker was able to win election. So Illinois is going to go to Elizabeth Warren in this model. Now, Wisconsin. Hillary Clinton did lose Wisconsin narrowly. Again, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania was basically the difference in 2016. Democrats did very well here in the midterms. Tony Evers won his election, unseating Republican incumbent Scott Walker. Tammy Baldwin also won re-election. However, there's just been not quite enough evidence on the general election, on the federal level, to suggest that Wisconsin is in danger of being flipped from Republican to Democrat. So I think this will be a very close state again, but for right now, without much polling data, that's a key retention for Donald Trump. And as of now, across the entire country, he has not lost one state that he managed to carry in 2016. Indiana shouldn't be too concerning either. Mike Pence is really going to help him in Indiana. Obama did win the state of Indiana, and of course, up until 2018, the Democrats had Joe Donnelly, a senator from Indiana, but he was pretty soundly defeated in his re-election bid. So for now, Indiana's going to remain with the Republicans. Now, Michigan. To me, this is the state that Democrats have to look to the most. Turnout in Detroit was very low. In the 2016 election, there will obviously be efforts to raise turnout levels in Michigan. Debbie Stabenow, the senator, won re-election there. Gretchen Whitmer also won election in Michigan, unseating the Republican governor there. So I'm going to give this one to Michigan. Of the 3 states that we talked about, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, Michigan is the most left-leaning state out of those 3. So I'm going to give that to the Democrats. Now, Ohio... of course, Obama won it both times. The second time, much closer than he did the first time. Sherrod Brown, that was a potentially very worrisome re-election for the Democrats, but they did hang on there. Cincinnati down here in the southwest portion of the state does vote blue, but not by a big enough margin to really make this too troubling a state for Ohio. Cleveland and Akron and Columbus are much more blue and in favor of the Democrats. But for now, I'm going to give 18 electoral votes to Donald Trump. So far, again, he's only lost one state. Democrats are going to have to do better than that to unseat Donald Trump at this point. Let's head down south to Florida. Florida has been extremely positive for the Republicans since 2016. It's shifted pretty dramatically to the right. Marco Rubio, of course, won re-election in 2016. Trump won it in 2018. Or rather, I got that backwards. Rubio won it in 2014, Trump in 2016. And then in 2018, Bill Nelson, the longtime senator, was defeated by Rick Scott, and Ron DeSantis replaced Rick Scott in the governorship. So that is an overwhelming piece of evidence that this is not a state that the Democrats are doing too well in right now, even though they did make some gains in the House, particularly down here in the Miami-Fort Lauderdale area. That's 29 for Donald Trump. So he's within 50 votes of being reelected here. Again, he's only lost one state. Georgia, 16 votes. Stacey Abrams came close. David Perdue faces a potentially tough race in 2020. I don't see that one changing, though. Too early to tell. South Carolina, the governor race was fairly close. Not in a general election, though. Now, North Carolina, I think, is the state in this area where Democrats really have to look to as a target. Hillary Clinton did come close. Of course, Obama did win one time. Kay Hagan, John Edwards, so Democrat, and of course Roy Cooper, the current governor. So, given the fact that Hillary Clinton was very unpopular and she came very close, I'm going to give this one to Elizabeth Warren. That's a huge win for her because Trump is only within 24 of being reelected here. So that's now his second loss. He lost North Carolina and Michigan. Virginia. Now, this is a state that Democrats are pretty comfortable with up until recently, though, because of the controversy surrounding Governor Ralph Northam. Potentially that could, alienate some independents. Because there are a lot of rural areas of Virginia, I would expect that combined with the Ralph Northam situation, I would expect Virginia to be pretty close in the 2020 general election. But I think it's just too Democratic leaning right now. I'm going to give Virginia to the Democrats. West Virginia was incredibly lopsided in 2016. But for now, even though it might be a little bit closer this time, there's just nothing to really suggest otherwise. Joe Manchin, a very moderate Democrat, he did win his reelection, which was a good sign for the Democrats, but he'll be really the only kind of Democrat that I think could win there. Elizabeth Warren just not quite moderate enough for the Democrats to have much of a chance here in 2020. Maryland, very, very blue, not much to discuss there. Baltimore, one of the most liberal states in the entire country. Delaware, same thing. New Jersey, of course, Chris Christie, but in a general election, of course, Elizabeth Warren, very well liked in this part of the country. That's going to go blue. D.C., arguably the most liberal city in the entire United States. Nothing to discuss there. Now, Pennsylvania. Patrick Toomey did win re-election, which was a huge retention in the Senate for the Republicans in helping them keep their majority. Trump, of course, did win the state of Pennsylvania. Turnout in Philly, which is right up there with D.C., Baltimore, New York City, as one of the most liberal cities in the entire country. I do think, though, that given the fact that Tom Wolf and Bob Casey both won re-election, and given the proximity to Elizabeth Warren's home state here, I think she is going to win re-election here. I think Elizabeth Warren is going to win the state of Pennsylvania. That's a huge win for the Democrats because there's not much else that Donald Trump can win up in this portion of the country. But we still have a couple states to get to. New York, the Republicans can get some representatives elected up here. Some mayors potentially. They've come close in some governor elections, but right now, with the New York City area and all the boroughs, just not much of a chance. New York just too big, Manhattan too big a city, and then further cementing it, Buffalo, Syracuse, Rochester, Albany, all Democratic strongholds. 29 electoral votes to Elizabeth Warren, and now we're at 251 to 247. Connecticut, same thing. Even though the governorship was pretty close, the governor race was pretty close there. General election, not going to be a problem for the Democrats. Rhode Island, liberal stronghold. Massachusetts, this of course is Elizabeth Warren's home state. And that's 11 votes, and that puts her right on the doorstep, needing just one more to take this one home. Before we forget, let's come down here. Alaska, both senators there, Dan Sullivan, Lisa Murkowski, are sort of the more moderate variety for Republicans. I'm going to give that to Donald Trump, and it's 3 electoral votes. And then here's Hawaii. Brian Schatz, Mazie Hirono are both very popular there. Hawaii tends to side with the more liberal justices, senators, governors, and so that to me is what's going to put Elizabeth Warren over the top with 273 votes. Vermont, liberal stronghold. New Hampshire is pretty conservative for this part of the country. Just considering Warren's already gotten over the finish line here, I'm going to give this one to Donald Trump. And then Maine, with its 4 electoral votes, I think we could see another split decision here with the Democrats taking 3 of the 4. With Democrats taking 3 of the 4 votes. But again, for now, we'll just give that one to Maine here. There we go. Now we can flip it. So Republicans taking 1 of those districts. There, I finally got it right. So 278 to 260 is the final tally here. So in both of my first videos here, I've got Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren defeating Donald Trump. We'll come back with another video featuring Tulsi Gabbard, the lone representative at large here from Hawaii. So again, thanks a lot for watching, and be sure to tune into the next video.